I'd like to invite Will Duncan, Executive Director of the Seams Association, to the stage. Welcome, Will.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm excited to be here, and I thank you for joining us. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you this morning. Before I start, would like to thank ATS and Jeff Streeter in particular, as well as Jason Shin and Chase Vance for all the work they did, in particular in coordinating these programs. They've done a great job this week. I wear two hats. I have the honor of serving as CEO of WBA. We are a management and operations consulting firm. We focus on supporting brands, retailers, and manufacturers. We work to maximize the effectiveness of their people, their processes, and their technologies. The cornerstone of our consulting is in the area of lean. So we help brands, retailers, and manufacturers implement lean processes throughout their operations, whether it be in product development. And that whole cycle from tech design into from concept to tech design into sourcing and all the way through. We also work with factories in helping them transition from progressive bundle manufacturing, traditional manufacturing, over to putting in lean lines, lean teams, speed to market efforts, quick response. About 2 years ago, I had the honor of also taking over responsibility for and serve as executive director for an association called the Seams Association. We've been around for 50 years and serve as the association and voice for the sewn products industry. Our vision is to strengthen the impact of Made in America and in today's global economy. We have over 200 members from throughout the US supply chain. So we have a few brands and retailers that are members. About 35% of our membership are the cut and sew manufacturers that are here in the States. The rest is the rest of the supply chain. So we have your textile guys, we have your knitters, weavers, dyers, finishers, spinners, printers, as well as thread companies, as well as the equipment providers and software providers. So we pretty much span the entire US supply chain. Seams is really a networking association, and we do a number of things, but we put on 2 events per year. We have just finished one this past few weeks ago in Savannah, and at that one we were able to announce the winners of the first National Sewn Products Reshoring Awards. And we have 3 categories that we've set up. We have one for cut and sew manufacturers, we have one for textile suppliers, and we have a category for brands. And the winner of our cut and sew category is Union Wear, and the winner of our textile award is Contemporary Fabrics in Lumberton, North Carolina. Union Wear is in New Jersey. And the winner of our brand award is Mara Hoffman, based out of California and also offices in New York. We will be doing it again in 2020. And so I encourage you, if you fit into one of these 3 categories, please apply. We'd love to have you, and you do not have to be a Seams member to apply for the award. Our next conference will be this fall in September, and that will be held in Greensboro. So we'd love to have you come. So our role is to try and improve and grow the U.S. domestic sewn products industry and to drive business to our consumers. And we launched a new website about 2 years ago. Please check about a year and a half. Please check it out. It's pretty robust. There's a lot of good information there. One of the tools that we built into this, in trying to build this bridge, because right now there are a lot of brands that would like to source domestically. The problem is they don't know how to do it anymore. Okay? They may be able to find a cut and sew. They don't have the talent, and a lot of times they don't have the patience to put together a domestic supply chain. You might be able to find a cut and sew guy, but it's more than that. You have to put together the full supply chain. And that's where Seams is serving as that bridge to allow that to happen. One of the things we've built into our website is our power search tool. It works like a Google search. So if you're looking for thread, or you're looking for denim, or you're looking for a children's wear manufacturer, or a piece of equipment, whatever you're looking for, you can enter that. It will go out and query our database of our members' profiles and come back with a list of companies that can provide that product or service. And it'll pull their profile up and has the contact information, take you to the website, and a contact person that you can reach out to. All right. So we are building that bridge. Now, the apparel industry is in a state of change. Would you agree with that? That's a pretty fair statement to make, right? We are in a severe, extreme state of change within our industry. We have shifts in global sourcing. We have brands that are changing the countries that they're sourcing. I'm not even going to go into the tariff issue that's affecting our industry right now. Okay? What about sustainability? You've heard some about that as well this week, right? That's impacting our industry. It's bringing about significant change in how we go about our businesses. And another one, the reemergence of hemp as a textile fiber. That's another one that's coming on. Companies are looking at. Another one that's driving significant change is all the emerging new consumer buying channels, the way that we have, the options we have, and how we purchase apparel and sewn products. And we're seeing more and more emerge every day. You know what hadn't changed? The way our brands source, the sourcing models we use. Most brands are still using the same sourcing models and supply chains that were started 30 years ago when everybody started moving offshore. That's not changing. And what is it based on? How do we source? How do companies source today? The majority of them. It's based on lowest labor cost wins. Okay? That model doesn't fit most of these emerging consumer buying channels. It doesn't support them today. Okay? You know, the elephant in the room is always cost, isn't it? When we're negotiating, it never should have been. The true objective is improved customer satisfaction and increased margin dollars. Brands must stop sourcing based on lowest landed duty. Okay, because if you compare landed duty against manufacturer cost here, which one's going to win? Offshore every time, okay? Almost every time. But lowest labor cost does not always win. Especially when you factor in markdowns and stockouts and inventory carrying costs and on and on. There are many product sectors that the product should be made here in the U.S. when all those are factored in, okay? Or certainly within the region. Some companies are beginning to see that. all right, and are making these changes. And some of these statistics reflect those changes. U.S. man-made fiber and filament, textile and apparel shipments were 73 billion in 2017. We've seen a 5% increase in 1 year, up to $76.8 billion. And you can see the breakdown by sector. More than $2 million was spent on capital expenditures in 2017. $2 billion was spent on capital expenditures in this country in 2017. It's happening. It's not huge, but it is happening. It's coming back. The U.S. is the 4th largest textile, single country textile exporter in the world today. And we're seeing new This is not being caused by existing companies alone. We're seeing new growth. We're seeing companies like Vidalia Mills is opening a new denim factory in Vidalia, Louisiana. They will employ 300 workers and produce 15 million yards of denim per year, and they're set to go live fourth quarter of this year. We're seeing companies, and it's not just U.S. investment, we're seeing international investment, like Everest Textile. They're a Taiwanese company that has opened a 400,000 square foot facility in Forest City, North Carolina, up in the mountains. They produce knits and wovens, as well as have cut and sew within their facility. They currently employ 265 workers and are continuing to grow. It's not just, one of the other things that's causing some of these companies, driving some of these companies, new businesses, is technology. Like this one. This is a new one. Evolution is located in St. Louis, Missouri. They will have 300 stole machines, flatbed knitting machines in place, and employ 50 to 60 workers. And they're set to go online this year as well. This next factory is one that a lot of people are waiting for. I am as well. $20 million investment. Ty Garments is setting up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and they have partnered with automation company out of Atlanta, Software Automation, that will be pretty much fully automated and be able to produce t-shirts in 26 seconds is what they're projecting. They'll have a ton of these Sobots producing these t-shirts. Now, we're trending in the right direction. There's far more demand than there is capacity today in the States. There's just not enough capacity. And the biggest, textiles is doing pretty well. It used to be a few years ago, you couldn't find the textiles. But in a lot of product sectors, textiles are available. The bottleneck right now is this cut and sew sector that we just don't have enough of right now. There's a lot of work that has to be done to rebuild it. You've got to rebuild the talent. It takes training. And that's one of the things that we see missing is training to rebuild. A lot of the companies don't train like they used to. They've lost that capability, whether it be operators, supervisors, engineers, plant managers. So that's something that we have to build back and have to put in those training programs. Because what happens is a lot of the existing manufacturers are just trying to continue to hire the same people, right? And they just end up having to pay a nickel more to get somebody, rather than, there is a workforce out there now, and I'll talk to it a little bit later in this, but you can attract people if you have the right environment, and you allow them the opportunity to learn and grow, right? not sit at a sewing machine doing the same thing over and over all day. That's not rewarding. How do we change that? That's the challenge. And there are people out there that would like those jobs, not necessarily to sit there all day doing the same thing, but there's ways to re-engineer our factories. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, okay? You know, technology is a wonderful thing. And it is emerging for our industry. We're seeing it come back, and we're seeing dollars invested in it. You know, there was a lot of good technology, Jeff, you can attest to this, 30 years ago in our industry. It was starting to come. And then everything moved offshore, and it was just this chase cheap labor again, and no investment in our industry was really made in the manufacturing sector. We saw it on the front end throughout product development, okay? And at retail, it's pretty amazing, some of the technologies, but we haven't seen it much in the manufacturing sector. Well, that's starting to change. We're starting to see it. We still need more dollars. We need more investment, much like footwear has done. They have invested heavily and basically have adopted two disruptive technologies in their business that have completely changed the way, in particular, footwear is being made. This 4D knitting, they basically have the ability to knit the upper, okay? Then you combine that with 3D printing and the ability to print the sole. What do you have? You've got a top and a bottom that you have to put together. Maybe a little bit of embellishment, but they've gotten that down to where it's pretty much automated process. Check this out.
When we first started with the idea of Futurecraft, it was to sort of guide us, to set us on a path.
It's a mindset and it's a philosophy to try things.
We're always bringing in new influences, new ideas, new collaborations. 3D printing, for example, was one of these new technologies that really had unlimited possibilities. You know, the initial problem was, okay, can we actually make a running shoe out of 3D printed material that really works and works well?
So when we started thinking about doing 3D printing, we wanted to use liquids because liquids give you the most flexibility in material design. I think of light as a chisel. Light triggers the solidification of the liquid, but oxygen inhibits it. That allows us to have the object grow.
What's really interesting about this collaboration with carbon is we're seeing a convergence of a completely new manufacturing technology.
We're going to scale it with the best industrial partner in the business.
We're able to deliver tens of thousands and moving to hundreds of thousands and into the tens of millions. You know, that's clear in front of us.
We have this amazing opportunity to innovate the printing process, the liquid rising.
And growing in that context can give you new design thoughts you've never had before and new performance capabilities that wouldn't be possible by traditional manufacturing.
This three-dimensional mesh structure, it's a lattice, it's a matrix, it's a web of individual elements. Each one of those little elements is tuned specifically for a purpose.
These lattice structures behave quite differently than anything we've dealt with before. They're much different than foams. Now we have every individual area of the shoe to work with, which is a completely new horizon for us, a new venture.
If you really want to make a shoe that's a size 9, that same shoe for someone who's 180 pounds versus 100 pounds has got to be different.
We can go in within every single cell and engineer that exact cell to do exactly what the consumer needs it to do just for them.
That's fascinating. That's going to change how we create products and certainly how consumers experience products. And I think that's how we see something like Futurecraft 4D playing into the life of an athlete. I would say this is just the very beginning, and you know, it sounds silly and cliche, but who knows, man? I don't know what's next, and that's what's great about going to work every day.
So Adidas has opened Speed Factory in Germany. They've opened one in Atlanta. Has anybody ever been in one of their factories? I haven't found anybody yet that I've asked this of that's been able to get into one. I'd love to see what they're doing. But they're basically setting these up in they're called speed factories, and they're able to produce for that region, regionally for that region. So they can tailor the designs and so forth specific to that region, and are going to be opening these up all over throughout the U.S. to serve regional markets. There's a lot of lessons for us within the apparel sector to learn from what footwear is doing. However, there are differences, right? I mean, apparel is using 3D printing now. I'm not sure you'd want to wear it every day, right? Okay, but there are applications for it. It's being used to create a lot of trim items now. So buttons and things of that nature can actually be, snaps and so forth can be produced using this technology. And someday they'll figure out how to 3D print apparel that we will want to wear on an everyday basis. But we're a ways away from that. Okay? There's also differences in the product. What footwear is done is more akin to how the hard goods industry produces than we are. When you think about all the style changes and just the inherent characteristics of soft goods, that's the challenge. Everybody thinks we're a simple industry. Well, we got a very complex supply chain when you go from cotton fields, from dirt to shirt, right? What you saying now? Dirt to shirt, what's the other one? Farm to fiber, right? To fashion, right? So it's a pretty complex supply chain when you peel that back. And the products aren't easy. Technology doesn't, or automation doesn't necessarily lend itself yet to handling all those style changes. Okay? But we are, like I said, we are investing in technology again. Like vision-directed sewing, where it can actually read the outline of what it is it's to stitch and then can stitch that. As you see here, it's reading the numbers and has the ability then to stitch, so you have that flexibility. Or 3D sleeve setting, as you see up top. 3D shoe sewing, sewing for dashboards, so forth. Or robots that are being used to sew furniture, as well as this ultrasonic cut and seal. It's being used to sew ironing boards and airbags. Robotics, they're coming. Remember the company I mentioned, Software Automation, that's setting up the t-shirt factory out in Little Rock? Well, here's a line that they've set up, and it is being used for home goods, to produce home goods. But they have set up these sew bots that have the ability to sew the products. Robotics, it's coming. Still got a long ways to go though. We're years away from the lights out factory. It's going to require us thinking and doing differently in our factories. Factories cannot be based on traditional manufacturing. Okay? Just everybody been in a cut and sew factory before? It's here. Okay. If you haven't, that's what it looks like. Okay. You can go anywhere in the world, and you're going to see a factory that looks just like that, whether it's the United States or Asia or all points in between. Okay. Some of the drawbacks of this type of manufacturing are we have large batches or bundles of work, right? Stacked everywhere, all over the factory. Sometimes you can't even see the operator. He's buried by all the bundles of work. We have how work in process, so we have all this work in process. How about our lead times? From the time you start it to the time you finish it is how long? How many minutes in a t-shirt? 4 minutes, 3, 4, 5 minutes, depending on the styling. That's how much labor goes into it. How long does it take to go from the time you start sewing it to the time you get it's finished in a lot of factories? Days, used to be weeks to produce a product all the way through. For a product that has less than 5 minutes in it. Why is that? Okay. How about quality? When did we discover our quality defects in this environment? At the end of the line. We're inspecting in work versus building in work, are we not? And how flexible are we to changes in demand? You get that rush order that's got to go through, which today is pretty much every order, right? But then you get that super duper rush order that's got to go through. What does it have to do? It's got to leapfrog all that other work and you spend as much time trying to run down the ones that got lost as you did putting them through in the first place. Okay? Our factories must be more flexible and responsible, capable of supporting the needs of all these new consumer buying channels that are, in a lot of cases, built on speed, right? Speed to market. This is reinforced by this survey conducted by McKinsey. They surveyed over 275 executives globally, fashion executives globally. There were 3 key takeaways from the survey. 1, companies must look at opportunities, not just challenges. Okay? You have to look for opportunities, not just at the challenges. Companies that succeed will recognize that the old rules don't necessarily apply in today's marketplace. And regardless of your size, companies have to be nimble, think digitally first, and achieve faster speed to market. Companies like On Point Manufacturing, who have built their whole business model around demand-activated manufacturing. So that's basically where it doesn't get produced until it's been sold. So then they're producing it. They're in Florence, Alabama, and they can support customization. And guess what their minimum order quantity is? 1. Go to a manufacturer today and tell them, I want to get one made. Yeah, look, you laughed, right? That's what they do. How many manufacturers do we have in here? Anybody? Anybody in the cut and sew? Have a cut and sew facility here? Okay. Somebody, can you do orders of 1 or do you take orders of 1? You just laugh, or are you hungry? For the right price, absolutely. That's the answer, that's the key, okay? But running samples through your production is very difficult and it's very, very expensive. And if you actually look at it, it's usually more than 4 times what you'd normally pay, right? Okay. So, how can you build your business to accommodate that, where you can run it? Probably not at the price you're going to do if you got to order 100,000, but to where it puts you back in the ballpark, within the price points you need to be at. Check them out. Or companies like Clothier Design Source. How many startup or emerging brands do we have here? Anybody? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Absolutely. Well, how difficult is it to start? It's hard, isn't it? It's tough. That's why you're here. It's hard to find somebody who can help walk you through that process. Certainly that you can afford. This company built their business for that, to help emerging and startup brands. Right? They'll help hold your hand, help you with the design aspects of it. They'll help you with the prototyping. They'll help you put together the tech designs. Right? And they will manufacture your first run production. And then small orders, they have the ability to actually do production orders after that, not in large scale, but in smaller volumes as you're growing. Okay? It's pretty cool. There's not many of those that exist today that have those capabilities to do that, and the knowledge. Except for Ram here, he knows how to do it. The U.S. factory of the future will embrace automation where applicable and available, but not be solely dependent on it. At least not today, okay? Because as we said, we're a ways away from the lights out factory. We're getting there, and we're going to see it soon for t-shirts and then probably dress shirts and some of the commodity items. But when it comes to a large percentage of our industry, which has a lot of style change and quick runs and constantly changing, we're a ways away. We'll get there one day, okay? But you don't have to wait till that day comes. Everybody's waiting for that holy grail to really invest in U.S. production. You don't have to wait, okay? I'm working on a initiative that I've been working on it for several years called the Reshoring Fashion Initiative. And the purpose of the Reshoring Initiative is to create jobs in the U.S. by creating a modern model factory that redefines the production of sewn goods. I've written a white paper on it. If you have interest, it's very short, it's a 2-pager. I'll be glad to share it with you. Just, you can email me. Okay? It will incorporate lean manufacturing, like I was talking about earlier, right? It looks, feels, and operates much different than your traditional factory. You can compare the two, right? I ask you, which environment would you rather work in? Okay? And it operates like this. So this is a placket shirt line that you see. This lady here is starting, she's cutting in the placket. We're going to follow a shirt all the way through the line. So when she finishes at the first station, what does she do? She doesn't discard it and then pick up another one, all that handling. She actually has it in her hand. She moves to the next workstation. And then what happened? The lady beside her came back and took hers. She continues up the line. We're following that same shirt all the way through the line. So she's now what, on her third operation? She's going to move around to the next operation. Start on her fourth operation. But she's cross-trained. The lady comes back and takes hers. Now, she doesn't have any work. Where does she go? She goes back to wherever that other lady was and takes hers. We call it pulling. She's going to pull from her. And that one goes back to the head of the line to start the next one. You're going to see it right here. Okay? So she's going to block her, take hers, he takes hers, takes hers, sends her back to pull the next one into the process. We're pulling work through versus pushing work through. Okay, so the end of the line is actually what dictates when the next one comes in. So you can see this lady here is going to finish it up. She's going to fold it, put it in the bag, put it in the box, and the process starts. So that's what starts that process, all the way back to pulling the next one in. Now, when she put that in that box, that very easily could have had a shipping label on it. It could have been shipped direct to the consumer, right off the end of the production line. Now you want to talk about reducing some of the costs? What if we have the ability to bypass the distribution center and ship right off the ends of these production lines to the consumer? Okay, tremendous savings. So, we talked about the drawbacks of traditional manufacturing. Now, don't get me wrong. That traditional factory, they can be set up to run well if you're producing pretty much the same thing over and over. But when it comes to style change, especially in today's environment, they break down. Okay, because most of those operators on piece rate, and every time you get a new style in, they haven't done before, how are you going to pay it? It is a nightmare to run a factory, traditional factory, effectively in today's environment. Okay? Some of the benefits of lean. You just saw a shirt made in minutes. Okay? So if you have a 10-minute shirt, you have 5 people, one's going to fall off that line every 2 minutes. And how long from the time we start it to the time we finish it? 10 minutes. And now what if you get an order for a different style? They're highly cross-trained, highly flexible. They can adapt, okay? You can readjust. The machines are on casters, so if you need to roll one out, pull a new one in, you can. We have minimal work in process. How many, if you have 5 people in there, how many shirts are in process at any one time? 5? It's self-balancing. Supervisor never has to tell anybody when and where to move, which is what most supervisors spend 60 to 80% of their day doing, balancing the line. You've just given them back 60 to 80% of their day to do the things they're supposed to be doing. The team members take on ownership. Quality is built in. We put in these teams that we are able to eliminate 100% inspection and go to audits. We do audits, but you don't need, the teams mature to the point they own it. They take responsibility for quality. Productivity goes up, reduction in cost. Cost for this is down, okay? And very important to me is you have much greater employee involvement. The workers take on ownership. It becomes their own little factory. Okay, and there's all kinds of ways you can be creative in how you reward them financially within these lines. And but they own it. It's their factory, their business partners. So if they don't feel good that day, who do they have to call to tell they don't feel good? Not a supervisor, their teammates who know what they were doing the night before. Okay? This new modern model factory will employ lean manufacturing. It will employ technology and automation as it becomes available. Extensive cross-training, as you saw. It will have lean business practices. It's a greenfield environment, so when we start it up, not just in manufacturing will be lean, but all the business processes from how we order coffee cups to how we receive purchase orders and process purchase orders will have gone through lean thinking. All the non-value added activities and waste stripped out. All right? It will be a lean supply chain, and it will involve extensive collaboration throughout the supply chain with our upstream and downstream. Lean management, okay? Because the workers are taking on so much responsibility, it doesn't require all this overhead. We're looking at 80 to 150 worker facilities. Once you get much over that, you do have to build in extra overhead. That's part of the problem. It's basically lean on steroids, okay? So we want to break this management paradigm that exists today about workers, becoming robots and how we manage them, and they can't take on ownership and we can't trust them. That's just not true. If you've got untrustworthy people in your factory, you shouldn't have them in there. All right? Not only will they be highly cross-trained out in the workforce, out in production, but we're going to repurpose repurpose the workers. They're going to take on responsibility for all the admin and indirect labor functions. So imagine a workforce that works 35 hours a week in production. And the other 5 hours, they're going to be trained to do accounts payable, purchasing, inventory control, accounts receivable, garment costing, and on and on and on. What does all this mean? Manufacturing sewn products in the U.S. makes good business sense. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Thank you. Okay, and thank you for being here. Let me add one more thing. I am trying to set up this facility. Have investors. I have help from the state. A lot of different entities interested in helping get this thing started. My intention is to set one up that can serve as a model factory, and will be open for the industry to come tour and so forth. We'll probably run educational programs out of there to help building this infrastructure back. And then we want to offer franchise apparel factories for brands that may want one, or entrepreneur in Spokane, Washington, inner city Chicago, or rural North or South Carolina, wherever, that want to put 80 to 150 people to work. Okay? It looks, smells, tastes, feels different than an apparel factory today. There are a lot of people out there, 18 to 26, that want to work, that still can't find jobs in a lot of regions of our country. We're looking at high school graduates that we're going to train up. A lot of people say, well, yeah, you're going to train them how to do those admin stuff, and people are going to pick them off. And I'm going to go, that's a great thing. Look what we just did, and we're going to train somebody else. Okay? So I'm looking for brands. I have 2 smaller brands interested. I need brands that are willing to commit to this, that get it, that understand the financial aspects of this. I'm not looking for money, I'm just looking for work and a commitment for 2 years to keep this busy to allow us to get it up and running and prove itself. So if you know of anyone or have interest, please contact me. I'd love to hear from you, and we'll go through the steps of looking at the products and costing, because it's got to make sense, it's got to make money. It's not just motherhood and apple pie, it has to make business sense. Okay? Like I said, it has to make business sense. Yeah. Any questions? Anybody? Yeah, Jeff.
Will, thank you for sharing your insights on Made in USA and the potential. That was great. Thank you. So, and I'm quite confident that the entire audience here supports this and is encouraged by reshoring or Made in the USA. But we all read the papers and read online and see that our economy, the US economy, is robust. Unemployment's at the lowest since the 70s.
It is.
Unemployment is at 4.5%. So even though you mentioned just a moment ago that you would target, say, high school graduates and young people, with 4.5%, assuming that people are investing in starting factories here in the States and the future continues down this trend, how do you find the labor? How do you make it attractive enough as compared to technology?
Okay. Or nothing against McDonald's, but we're going and taking a job in McDonald's, right? All right, we're talking 18 to 26-year-olds, high school degrees, they are not going to college. All right, if you look in North Carolina in the rural communities and counties, unemployment is not 4% in that demographic. It's much higher. If you look at inner cities, you think it's 4% in that demographic? No, it's not. Okay? A lot of these people are choosing not to work. A lot of them can't find jobs. They don't have those in their communities. In a factory like this, in some of these rural counties in North and South Carolina, I mean, I'm talking with the economic development We know the unemployment and what the potential is. They're telling me if you put this in, because we're looking at paying $15 an hour and plus benefits on top of this and the opportunity to earn more. So tell me a job that you're going to train you and develop. Yeah, you're going to have to work. You know, you're going to have to work. You're going to have to learn to sew. You're going to have to learn how to work hard. But you're not going to be sitting at a machine doing the same thing over and over. You're going to learn how to do multiple things. And it's going to be, and the opportunities there to learn more than just that, to learn other skill sets, to take ownership. Okay, to learn how to work together as a team and actually run your own little business. That's the beauty of these lean lines. It's their own little business. It's their factory. They own it and they run it like that. We've done most of this. The difference with different of our clients over the last 20 some years, we've put in a lot of these components. The tough part, or what we haven't been able to do, is put all of it in one factory or one business, if you will. This model factory is going to be a greenfield environment to allow us to bring all of that under one roof, which is needed to compete today. Anybody else?
Right.
Anybody?
We actually are out of time for questions.
Cut me off.
Will, are you going to be around a little
Yeah,
bit
I'll
afterwards?
be around.
Okay, so if anybody has any more questions for Will, they'd like to speak with him, left stage, that's kind of where you can do it. Okay.
Thanks, Jason.
so much, Will.
Y'all have a great day.